lesson 18, Vishuddhi Chakra. Vishuddhi Chakra is the throat chakra. Vishuddhi Chakra is distinguished, it's kind of like the crossroads between the lower chakras being the physical body and the higher chakras being the mental and the causal body. And it distinguishes itself symbolically by the characters that you find in the it has Sanskrit characters in the leaves that you find at the edge of it, 16 vowels, while all the other chakras, the characters contain consonants. The idea is that consonants are disturbing the harmony, while vowels are harmonious by nature. So the chakra, by using only vowels symbolically, is regarded as inherently the center of purification. Now this is very interesting because everybody, including people who practice yoga on a daily basis, even for many years or decades, everybody has an issue on the level of the throat chakra. It is the center of expression, and everybody, anybody, has limitations with expression. As human beings compared to animals, we have the benefit of spoken language. But spoken language, if you look at it, especially from this point of view, understanding how complex feelings and emotions are, spoken language is very primitive, in fact, to fully express what we think, what we feel. And so, no matter how eloquent you are, no matter how well educated we are, we all bump into that obstacle, that expression in any form is never perfect, and therefore there will always be a disharmony at this level. And you can notice by the fact that almost everybody likes the color blue. This color blue. It is the color that represents this chakra. And it is this color that helps you obtain harmony, at least to some level. So, although my shirt is white, the symbol here is blue, my pants are blue, then if you look at my cloth hanger, I never consciously thought about it, but I made a picture of it and sent it to somebody, and that person said, well, all your jackets and coats are blue. And they are. Because blue has always been my favorite color. So, let's have a look at the characteristics of this chakra, which here are found on the next page. The subtle element of this chakra is ether. Now, ether, I found out throughout the years, is a concept that is not so much used in the English language. But in the Netherlands, the word ether is used a lot. especially when you listen to the radio. Because the DJ will constantly remind you or tell you that he is coming to you through the ether. Ether is thinner than air. Ether is the carrier of sound. So now, of course, we have fiber cables, but before the internet, before fiber cables and cable TV for that matter, TV was broadcast through an antenna. And every house had an antenna. There was no cable. The signal that you received in your radio and TV in the past was sent through the ether, not air, through the ether, from antenna to antenna. So ether is thinner than air. So you see the logic here. The more we go up, the more expanded the matter that we are dealing with. But ether in English language is not used that much. In Dutch it's a very common expression. The subtle vehicle of action, the karmendriya, is speech. That means expression. But it is not just speech, it's not just verbal expression. It is all forms of expression, meaning body language and the way that you radiate positive or negative vibrations, but also expression in an artistic way. When you make music, or when you paint, or when you make sculpture, or any form of artistic way. Dancing is an expression. There are so many ways that we express. It's all based on this chakra. The subtle vehicle, or the subtle organ of perception, the Jnanendriya, is hearing. When you are sattvic, all your chakras dominating function is perception. So when there is sattva in the throat chakra, your hearing is very sharp, even to the point that you can hear subtle things or phenomena that other people are not aware of. The subtle energy of this chakra is Vijnana Prana. The color I mentioned already is blue, and the mantra associated with this chakra is Ham. Many people, if you have paid attention, find silence very uncomfortable. So while we are busy cooking or working on the computer or cleaning, many people not only turn on the radio, these days almost everybody has the TV on all day while not watching, but they just need to be surrounded by the presence of the sound. As a yogi, you become more and more conscious of that, and you may instead start finding it kind of distracting and disrupting. But one of the things that I noticed when I came to Korea, something that was unusual where I come from Amsterdam, is that every shop, even the small street stalls where they are completely surrounded by the chewing gum and the cigarettes and the tickets that they sell, there's always room for a TV, which is on day and night. Every supermarket, every shop, every restaurant, everywhere TV. In the Netherlands, you didn't see that. I haven't been there for a long time. I don't know how it is today. But people need especially the sound of something in their close by. an indication of how deeply this affects people is the fact that silence is used as a form of torture. Or people who are imprisoned, which is already bad enough, if you don't behave, as an extra punishment on top of your punishment, you end up in isolation, where you are deprived of the TV that you have in the normal population or the radio. You're just isolated completely, including isolation of sound. And you know, European countries consider themselves to be civilized, so torture allegedly doesn't exist there. But when I was young, Europe had a problem with domestic terrorism. There was they call it Rote Armee-Fraktion in Germany, which is, Rote Armee means Red Army. Italy had its own Red Army brigades, and several European countries were dealing with pretty serious domestic terrorism. What, for example, the Rote Armee-Fraktion did in Germany, they robbed the banks on a very professional scale. And not only that, they robbed banks to fund their operations, but they were very anti-establishment, so they kidnapped politicians and captains of industry who often were killed. So when they arrested those terrorists, they subjected them to very cruel treatment by putting them in total isolation. Not just total isolation being alone, but in totally soundproof rooms, totally deprived of any sound, not only TV, radio, but any possible sound from the environment, which is very, well, call it a civilized form of torture, but it's very cruel. Because as a yogi, maybe your answer would be to close your eyes and focus on nada and your internal activity, but an untrained person can be driven to insanity, become psychologically harmed for the rest of their life, traumatized because of that. Interesting aspect is the subtle energy that is associated with this chakra. There's a Vijnana prana, which is considered what we call a ghost. So, ancient people were very sensitive towards subtle phenomena, and when you grow up as a child, you hear or read or watch ghost stories, and children generally are very intrigued by ghost stories. But where do these ghost stories come from? Are they real? Are ghosts real? Or is it just a fantasy? Apparently it's not a fantasy, because there are so many ghost stories, and many of which sound like very realistic. Only a critical mind would dismiss the existence of ghosts, thinking that those people are superstitious, because ghost is an energetic phenomenon. It's a phenomenon of subtle energy. It is the presence of a person's consciousness without its physical presence. Vijnana prana is that energy that stays behind. And it happens, for example, when a person dies prematurely, suddenly, through violence. Or when a person dies suddenly as a result of, or while in a condition of terrible distress. When a person dies peacefully, Vijnana prana, or the spirit, ghost, is in peace. That is when that energy ascends to heaven according to the religious scriptures. After death, the physical body dies, the ghost, the spirit, then ascends, goes basically to heaven as we call it. But when a spirit is very disturbed, is not in sattva, it stays behind and it lingers. And that is why many ghost stories are about a haunted house or a haunted place. Then you have the exorcist. Exorcist is a person that is hired, is brought in to chase the ghost away. And what the exorcist really does is connect with the energy. So it must be somebody who functions on a level of spirituality, a yogi, but it can be a religious person. And they usually, at least in the stories, they show up with a suitcase full of tools. They probably have a hammer and a silver nail or what have you, to drive out the evil spirit and what have you. But that is all window dressing. That is all showing off that they are doing something important there, something special there. But the real work of allowing that ghost to finally be in peace and ascend is basically done in silence. No tools. You just connect with the ghost, basically go into a communication with the ghost, making it calm down, come to peace, and tell the ghost it's okay, you can go now. It's time that you find your peace and you can go now. The phenomenon of disturbed energy in this chakra is also applicable, very apparent, when you look at burglar alarms. A burglar alarm suddenly starts making a lot of noise when it is triggered. So try to picture this. A thief who is burgling a house tries to do that unseen and unheard. So they usually do that in the dark, in silence, as quietly as possible, because they don't want to be detected. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be caught by the police or the owner of the house. What a burglar alarm does is it creates a huge noise that disorientates the burglar. The burglar is in shock and in a wild panic will get away as fast as they can. That is the purpose of a burglar alarm. And I have been fortunate to see something like that at work, in practice. Before I came to Korea, my job consisted out of visiting office buildings, hospitals, banks, insurance companies, and what have you, to maintain their interior plants. One day I was parked in an underground parking lot doing some administrative things before moving, and I saw somebody walking around that looked kind of suspicious. So I thought, this is interesting, so I just stayed where I was, and I just observed a burglar at work who was looking in cars to see if there is something of value. And at some point he broke open the car with a tool. He forced the lock. And the moment that he caught the door handle to open the door, it started making an enormous racket, an enormous noise. So, completely startled, he wanted to run away, but he was so disoriented that he ran around the car that he was burgling 3 times. I'm not exaggerating. He ran around the car 3 times before he finally found his way to the emergency exit. That is what noise does. It's the principle of the burglar alarm. But it also shows that silence can be subtle torture, but noise is also torture. And if I'm not mistaken, the American Army uses hard rock music to disturb people who are holed up inside a building that they cannot militarily, they cannot attack, they cannot bomb the building. They put huge speakers outside and play heavy metal, very loud, and it drives people crazy. Noise completely disorientates, it destroys, basically, the Vijnana prana of the throat chakra. Also, this also means when you are under attack yourself, the best approach is not to go along with the perpetrator out of fear, thinking that if you start resisting, that worse things will happen. The best approach is to make as much noise as possible. Of course, it's a different story if you're in a forest with nobody else around. Then the perpetrator knows that there is nobody that is alarmed by your screaming. But if you're in urban area where there are people here and there and everywhere, and you are under attack, you make a lot of noise, it's very, very likely that the perpetrator in sheer panic will run away. They may hurt you, hit you, to try to make you silent and cooperate, but that is only a moment of a second. If the noise continues like the burglar alarm, they are so disoriented, so in shock that they will flee. Good. The period of development of this chakra is the age 29 to 35. I forgot to mention the developmental stage of the heart chakra, which is 22 to 28, which is the time of our big love, and it is the time of idealism. So you saw in the chakra before, Manipura chakra, it's the time of rebellion, also protesting, sometimes violently, including rioting and looting. In the next stage, the heart becomes active. There is idealism. Greta Thunberg, who is not in that age bracket, but she is at a young age already showing that idealism by caring about what's happening in the world with the environment. From 28 to 35, you have a stage where you establish yourself and make a career. You start to worry about the future and lay the foundation for a prosperous stable, secure future. And this leads to a very interesting observation that I've seen throughout decades in Amsterdam. It is the people that were on the barricades protesting, standing up against the government, that eventually end up being the government. It is the intellectuals that are on the barricades protesting against the very people that they later become. And people scratch their head and say, how is this possible? How did they so totally turn around? Well, here you have the explanation. It's natural. There is a time of rebellion, there is a time of idealism, and then there is the time of realism. In the time of idealism, you don't calculate, and you follow your heart. In the time of realism, you start to worry about the future. You start to worry about needing to set something down for yourself there, where you can then basically benefit from for the rest of your life. And idealism apparently then goes out the window. Of course, it would be nice if some of that idealism stayed intact and you can find a nice balance between all of that and become a whole and complete human being, functioning from the heart. Questions? Questions about Vishuddhi Chakra?
When you were talking about how silence is a form of torture, I was thinking about how when I fight with someone, I often use the silent treatment, and I wondered if that was like a sign of, I guess, an underdeveloped Vishuddhi chakra.
Yeah, silent treatment is cruel.
That's what I wrote down. I was like, it's a type of cruelty, but
yes.
I do use it often.
You do use it.
Yeah.
Stop doing that.
I know.
Knowing what you know. In Dutch, we have an expression. When you give somebody silent treatment, we call it doodzwijgen. Dood is death, zwijgen is silence. So you kill people by silence. And it is an expression that exists for God knows how many thousands of years. But if you think about it, it's really true. So I understand that you use the silent treatment, but now that you know how it works, you use your heart and you cannot but stop using it. You know why? Because how do you feel when you get the silent treatment?
Oh yeah, it's terrible. But
Yes.
I think that's where the breakdown comes, is that that when I'm upset, that freezing in the heart and not being able to express.
Yes, I totally understand.
That connection just
Yes,
breaks.
I totally understand. So, you're only human, so that is your first reaction. But then you withdraw yourself, you settle down, you overlook the situation, then you come out of your shell and connect, communicate. For me, silent treatment really is deadly. It is so painful. Traumatic, even. So, because of that, I always respond to people when they send an email or a text message or just want to talk. Always respond. I know many people who don't. And because lots of communication goes through text messaging these days, you just feel that people play games by responding in a delayed way. You know that they are there and they have nothing else to do but to look at your message, and yet they take 15 minutes to respond, or a day to respond. People are playing games and it is hurtful. Because of that, I always respond. There are also people that you communicate through email and they don't get back at you. I always get back at people, no matter what. Why? Because of this. It's a matter of purity.
I have a friend.
If people play games, let them play games. I'm not going along with that. I just, because it is hurtful. It's very hurtful.
I have a friend who developed a really good tactic for managing this. If he was in a situation that he recognized was rattling him a little bit, he would say to the person, "I'll get back to you later because I want to respond, not react." And then he'd walk away.
Right.
And that worked really well for him.
Yes, but then people know what they are up to with you.
Yeah.
That is a very wise approach. If emotions are involved and you don't want to react, maybe leading to regret, then indeed, give me a little bit of time, I will get back to you. I do that too. If somebody contacts me, for example, with an issue that they want to talk about, I have an issue with this or I have an issue with that, I need to soak it up. I need to reflect on that a little bit, to be able to see and feel it from their point of view, and then I can give a good, sensible reaction. So I know how sensitive it is. So I'm not just taking my time to reflect on it. I immediately react and I say, please give me a little time to reflect, I will come back to you. Exactly like that. And then they are okay with the time that expires between their email and the reaction that you give them. Just be aware of it and follow your heart. You will naturally just not want to engage in it anymore. Knowing how much it harms you, you just naturally don't want to harm other people anymore. No matter how bad they are, you just don't want to be complicit with that anymore.
But mostly this is with girls more than boys. Boys will rarely go silent and girls will mostly go silent. Why is it that?
Yeah, maybe that is
the nature of fire.
Maybe true. Maybe that is the way that girls.
Because most of the husbands and wives, we hear this problem and friends will share this, that women are going silent and then men are coming to talk first always.
Okay.
It is also happening.
Yeah, because men are more about physical power and women are mentally, psychologically stronger. And
So that's why we have capability of being silent for more time.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you
Few
have to
years
see.
back, I also used to do that, even with my husband, when we used to get into a small fight and then I'll go silent for 3 or 4, I'll drag it to 4 days until what will I do? Like, if there is a reason, I would want him to come back to me and say that, it was my mistake, which he will never do, and I will wait. Till that time, I will wait. Like, if it is 4 days or 5 days, and 5th day, I will start talking slowly, and he was always the one who used to come to me. But then eventually, what I realized, like, nobody is going to change out of us two, and it's like my health started getting affected. I used to get a little headache or something, and then automatically, just because of these headaches and all, I did not know the cause and the reason behind it. But then eventually, I thought there's no use of it, and why are we unnecessarily making issues?
To be honest,
naturally it went away.
To be honest, the way that you describe the situation, I must admit that some men maybe deserve to be treated like that.
What?
Yeah.
What? Sorry?
Not the way that you describe the situation in which you communicate with your husband or non-communicate, I must admit that some men probably deserve the silent treatment.
But when I go silent, he is never pissed off. He never gets hurt, and that changed me. That changed me. I was expecting him to change, but that changed me.
Yeah, so it bounces right back
That
at you.
if there is no use, why should I go silent and affect my health? That's how I thought about it. So it's a layman's this thing, language, I'm saying, but now I understand
Yeah,
the
and
reasons
of course
and
everything is dynamic, fluid, so you cannot just put things in categories. Everything is always in motion, but you know, when people are communicating, also in a relationship, if you have a partner that does communicate and is also capable of admitting mistakes and you know, to reflect on one's own imperfections, then silent treatment is very, very cruel. But I think you are right that sometimes people just deserve it. But even then you then describe something that it actually bounces back on you, so then it's harming yourself in an indirect way. So yeah, you may
but men
reconsider.
are usually able to take things lightly than women. Sometimes women make unnecessary issues also. So it's just a small thing. Man will say it's a small thing and he will move on, and then he's sometimes they are ready to say sorry also, and girls are adamant. So
You know,
that's also a thing.
there's a
Depends
book.
on the individual.
There's a book. It's titled "Men Are from Mars and
Mars
Women Are
and
from
Venus,
Venus."
yeah, we need better to say that.
It says a lot. Yeah. But in the end, with good communication, you
No,
can.
but after knowing all this, we can relate to it and understand it deeper and connect with the causes and the reactions. So that really
Yes.
helps.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's all about subconscious functioning, the way that we act and react on issues that come our way. And when we become conscious of that, it just gives us a huge advantage in dealing with those situations. It's all about consciousness, it really is. Okay, let's have a short break.